This next story is the case of the abduction and murder of 7-year-old Morgan Violi from Bowling Green, Kentucky. And this is from the website Medium. Wednesday, July the 24th, 1996. Morgan was 7 years old and playing outside of her Bowling Green, Kentucky apartment with her 6-year-old friend, Destiny Miller. The two girls were walking across the parking lot when a man in a burgundy van suddenly drove up beside them. Destiny froze in horror as the man jumped out of the van and tried to grab her. She managed to get free from his grasp and started to run away. But she stopped when she realized that he had grabbed Morgan and had thrown her into the van. Witnesses quickly called police and gave them a description of the van and the driver. Several police officers gathered at the apartment complex and interviewed witnesses and relayed their information on to their colleagues who were out on the road searching for the van. Witnesses recalled seeing the van sitting in the parking lot before Morgan was abducted, and one teenager believed she had seen the same van in the area 1 or 2 days before the abduction. The driver was described as a white man in his 20s who didn't look as if he had shaven for several days. The van was either burgundy or dark red and was believed to be a late 1970s model or early 1980s Chevrolet with gold trim and a Kentucky license plate. Some people say that they had seen the van in the area for a day or two before the abduction. Police released a composite sketch of the driver and asked everyone in the area to keep an eye out for this man and the van. They received dozens of calls, but none of them led to Morgan or the kidnapper. Within hours of Morgan's abduction, multiple law enforcement agencies were searching for her. The Bowling Green Police Department, the Warren County Sheriff's Department, and the Kentucky State Police. The FBI joined in and searched all across the state. At first, everyone was optimistic and thought that they would soon find her, since they had such a detailed description of the van and the man driving. But as the afternoon carried on into night, their worries for Morgan's safety increased. The apartment complex was located close to Interstate 65. If the abductor had gotten onto the highway, he could have been out of the state before the police search was fully underway. Morgan's parents, Glenn and Stacy, were in the process of getting a divorce, but they put their differences aside so they could search for their daughter. The FBI advised Stacy to stay near her telephone in case someone called. She sat and worried and waited for the phone to ring, but all she received were calls from friends and family members wanting to offer help. Glenn and Stacy had been scheduled to be in court for a custody hearing just hours before Morgan was abducted. Before the hearing, Stacy had been awarded custody of Morgan and her 2 sisters. Glenn missed the hearing because he had to work. He had to be at a construction site early that morning. But when investigators learned about this and learned that there had been issues, they started to look at Glenn more closely. Although co-workers confirmed that he hadn't left work and that he had been at work when he had gotten a call to say that Morgan had been taken. Police asked him to take a polygraph exam. Investigators wouldn't discuss the results, but Glenn said he failed the first polygraph, and then they gave him a second one, which he passed. Stacy told reporters she was certain Glenn was not involved in Morgan's disappearance. If he was going to take one daughter, why wouldn't he have taken all 3, she asked. He loves all 3 of the girls. However, Glenn was only the biological father of Morgan. This raised more eyebrows with the public and with the police. They thought that maybe He told Stacy that he was okay with her having custody, but secretly he planned this to take the child. Police weren't able to find anything to say that he had any involvement in this. Stacy's other two daughters' father had died, and he originally wanted custody of all three girls, but eventually reached an agreement with Stacy for weekend visitation with them, and he had been satisfied with the outcome. Stacy also pointed out to police that it wasn't Morgan who the abductor originally was after, that he actually had tried to take the little girl, Destiny, and he tried to grab her first, but she was able to wiggle her way loose and get away from him and ran away. So if, by the mother's calculations, if it was the father had paid someone or set this up to take the little girl, Morgan, then why did they grab Destiny first unless they just didn't know which child was which? Morgan had been described as an outgoing little girl who had a lot of friends. She had been a student who performed in the school's talent show. She done gymnastics, and she got along well with all of her classmates. She sometimes got into trouble at school for talking too much. She loved spending time with her sisters and riding her dirt bike. She was real sassy. She thinks she's 15, people said. She's very grown up for her age. I'm hoping that her wits will get her out of this. Investigators continued to search for her, and they searched for the van. They compiled a list of all vans fitting the description that were registered in the state of Kentucky, and they started checking each one. They contacted law enforcement agencies in neighboring states to get a description of the van. They visited dozens of motels, rest stops, toy stores, restaurants, and other areas where a child might go, where someone might want to take a child. They distributed flyers with Morgan's photograph and a composite sketch of the kidnapper. But no one in any of these stores or rest stops or motels or anything said that they had seen anyone fitting those descriptions. By Thursday, with no suspects and no sightings of Morgan, police announced that they were offering a $5,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and indictment of the kidnapper. The case got national exposure that Saturday night when it was featured on an episode of America's Most Wanted. More tips flooded in after this episode aired. More detectives came in to help search. The case took a bizarre turn on Sunday when Glenn said a man in a blue van pulled a gun on him as he and some of his friends were standing outside of the apartment building. The man had pulled up to them and opened the window, and when the men said, "What do you want?" he pulled a gun on them. He pointed the gun at them and then pulled away. Detectives said they had no idea if this incident was connected to Morgan's abduction or not. Maybe the man had found another van and came back trying to find the little girl that he originally had his sights set on. People later believed that he had been watching the apartment complex and had seen these children, and that Destiny was actually his original target. A week after Morgan had been seen, detectives returned to the apartment complex, knocking on doors and interviewing residents. They hoped to learn something that they may have missed. Kentucky State Trooper Tommy Smith said, "We spoke with one little boy who gave us some information that we hadn't heard about before, but he refused to go into detail about what this was." Over the next couple of weeks, detectives followed up on tips as far away as Arkansas, Georgia, New York, Ohio, Tennessee, and Texas. More than 1,000 tips had been called in, but none of them brought investigators any closer to finding the missing child. Her parents remained optimistic that she would be found alive and made several public pleas for help. On October the 20th, 1996, a woman was walking on her property in Robertson County, Tennessee, when she made a gruesome find: the skeletal remains of a young child. The location was about 40 miles away from where Morgan was last seen. But police went there immediately, and the FBI believed the remains belonged to 7-year-old Morgan, but it took several days for them to identify the remains. When found, the body was unclothed and had been there for 3 or 4 months. A yellow hairband, identical to the one that Morgan had been wearing when she was kidnapped, was found nearby. It was this detail that led investigators to believe that this was Morgan, and forensic testing soon confirmed this. Everyone was devastated that Morgan had been found dead, but investigators remained optimistic that they would find the killer. They searched the area where her body was found for anything that might help identify the person responsible, but little was found. Witnesses recalled seeing a burgundy van and a white van parked about 100 feet from the site on July the 25th, 1996. The white van was believed to be a Ford, a 1979 or older model. It had a slatted trailer door type window on the passenger's side, and it had been parked there for about 4 hours. So, did this guy drive around in this maroon van until he found a victim, pick them up, and then take them to this white van where he assaulted them and murdered them? It doesn't say here if the child had been raped. I assume that she had been because she was unclothed. Morgan's parents initially did not want to believe that this had been their daughter that had been found. They prayed that it was someone else, but they were heartbroken when DNA confirmed that this was Morgan. Due to the amount of time that Morgan's remains had been exposed to the elements, investigators admitted that they may never know the true cause of her death. A forensic examination of the remains hadn't been able to determine how she died, but given the circumstances, detectives said that it definitely was a homicide. Morgan's funeral was held on Friday, November the 15th, 1996. In March of 1997, investigators went public with the fact that they had found the van used in Morgan's abduction. The van had actually been found 2 days after Morgan was abducted. Now, they had not released this information to the public, and they were doing forensic exams on the van. Investigators say that it had been abandoned at a truck stop in Franklin, Tennessee. Detectives learned that the van had been stolen from a home in Dayton, Ohio, only 1 day before Morgan was kidnapped, and they were certain it was the van they were looking for. They decided not to release this to the public until they were able to do forensic tests to make sure that it was the same van. Although they found the burgundy van, detectives were still trying to locate the white van that had been seen in the same area where Morgan's body had been found. And this led police and detectives to believe that there was a second person involved. Police released a sketch of the white van as well as a revised sketch of Morgan's kidnapper, and asked anyone in the area who thought they may have seen this man or this van to come forward. There was a $20,000 reward offered for information leading to the arrest. On the first anniversary of Morgan's murder, detectives were still struggling to find her killer. While they said they had a handful of potential suspects, they didn't have enough evidence to charge anyone. They were still hoping to find the white van that had been seen near the site where her body was found. Police admitted that they didn't have much physical evidence to work with, but they were still hoping they would find this person and get a conviction. Years went by and the case remained unsolved. In July of 2001, the reward for information had increased to $67,000. By July of 2006, Morgan had been gone for a decade, and her killer's trail had long grown cold. Now, all within a very short time of Morgan being abducted and found murdered, two other little girls were also abducted in a very close area, one in Goodlettsville, Tennessee, and the other in Clarksville, Tennessee. This all happened within a month of each other, and probably 45 to 50 minutes, miles apart from Bowling Green, Kentucky. Now, Jackie Beard was one of the children, and she was later found murdered, and the man that murdered her has been convicted and did get the death penalty. He's still alive, and he's still fighting this, and I will do a brief update on his story. And the other child's name was Lucy Meadows, and she went missing, but she was very much like Morgan. Her parents were in the middle of a custody battle as well, and many people believe that her mother made up this story, that she was in a parking lot at a shopping mall, and she got out of her car and went around to the other side of the car and was going to get the child out and go into the shopping mall. And she says that when she went around to the trunk of the car, she opened the trunk of the car to get her purse and some other items out, maybe a stroller. And when she went back, her daughter was gone. And she started screaming for help, and some people heard her and come running over. They said there was no sign of a child around anywhere. The surveillance camera on the building was panned, but it panned so slowly that by the time it got to her car, there were already people that gathered around, and she was telling them, someone took my daughter. Some people believe that this was a parent abduction, and that either she never had the child with her at that shopping mall, and she made this whole story up, and the child was taken before that, possibly given to a relative to hide away. Her mother was from Korea, and people believe that she may have arranged to have the child taken out of the country, although I don't know if they ever found any indication of that. And others believe maybe the father had something to do with it because of this custody battle. But either way, both of these children went missing very close to each other within weeks of each other. And Clarksville, Tennessee, where Jackie Beard went missing, will come up again very soon in another story that I have worked on about another woman who went missing. And I don't know if any of these stories are related. I don't know if the police and others involved, FBI and others, believe that these three little girls were targeted by the same people. But it's a good possibility because of the distance to each other. And the area where Lucy went missing was very close to the area where Morgan was discovered. Her loved ones continued to hope that they would find Morgan's abductor. Stacy admitted that she doubted it would bring her any closure. 10 years had done nothing to ease the pain of losing her daughter. Stacy said the day Morgan was taken was still fresh in her mind every single day. I never realized that there was anyone that evil who could just do that to a child. That's the day I lost my faith in the human race. In June of 2022, Stacy told reporters she was still waiting for Morgan's killer to be arrested. I still want that person found, she said. There's not anything on God's green earth that the justice system will do to that person that will equal what he has done to Morgan or what he has put me and my family through. As of August 2023, Stacy still has no answers. Morgan's case still remains open and active. No suspects have ever been named, and no one has ever been arrested. Morgan Jade Violi was just 7 years old when she was abducted and murdered in Bowling Green, Kentucky. She was a sweet, outgoing little girl who was always smiling, but her life was cut short by a killer who has never been identified. If you have any information in the case of Morgan Violi or her killer, please you can contact the FBI office in Louisville, Kentucky at 1-502-263-6000. And I will be coming back to do a little bit more of a follow-up on the cases of Lucy Meadows and Jacqueline Beard. Thanks for watching.